So they want to increase tax collection, taxing the rich. That's one of the goals. That's the reason why basically they were chosen. Because don't forget that the Greeks voted for them, and that actually the Greeks who voted for them wanted those reforms, just like Europe wants. They also want reforms. The Greeks want reforms. They want to end this system where a few take all and the rest is left paying for them. Bank reforms. One of the problems in Greece at the moment is that there are also profitable companies who would do very well, who have orders in portfolio, who are able to make a profit. But the problem is that they cannot get any money from the banks because the banks are not liquid. The banks do not have the money to finance, for example, short-term financing to buy materials to produce whatever they already sold. So those companies do not have any money to actually make a profit. So this is a very bad situation because those companies should be the engine of the economic recovery of Greece. So bank reforms, to write off non-performing loans, put them somewhere outside so that the banks can continue to do what they need to do and make sure that the economy recovers. And another thing that they say, we don't want any haircuts. And this is actually one of the things that that is happening at the moment, because a lot of negotiators from European countries, from the IMF, they say you got to accept these loans. You need to repay your debt. We cannot sell to our taxpayers that you are not repaying your debt. So we have to do this. We have to give you this loan and you need to accept it. And then what we will do in 1 year, 2 years, we will give you a haircut. And this is not official, this is unofficial. We will give you a haircut. And a haircut means that they will reduce the loan. So for example, make the payback period 100 years and against zero interest rate. That means basically giving a haircut. But the Greek politicians say, okay, no, this is exactly what happened before. This is why we got into trouble in the first place. This is what our politicians so far have always said yes to. We do not accept these haircuts. We want to pay back our debts, but we also want that there is a common interest. So we want to pay back our loans if the economy is growing, not when the economy is shrinking. So they make a condition in. And the European countries and the IMF say, well, no, we cannot accept that.
I cannot understand why the impact of the Greece issue against the EU. Why the German, especially for German, trying to remain to be the member of Greece of EU? I think Greece is not so big country.
So true.
And it is not so big impact to the EU, I think.
Two reasons. I think two reasons that immediately come to mind. Reason number one is because of the German banks. A lot of the German banks bought bonds from Greece. A lot of bonds from Greece. And they used that money to get money from the European Central Bank. The European Central Bank gave them that money and they put it into loans. Now you need to have it, in order to keep those loans, you need to have at least a number of bonds against those loans, right? So what happens if those bonds become worthless is that those banks need to start paying back all the money that they got from the European Central Bank. If that happens, they need to get all the money back from their creditors, which means that they immediately get into a lot of trouble. So basically, a Greek exit would cause a lot of trouble, especially at home, because a lot of loans from German banks to their own home domestic market is basically based on Greek bonds. So that is a big issue. That's number one. Number two is that Germany is also part of this monetary union, the euro. But the euro is also a currency that is traded outside of Europe. And the euro only, the European market on a global scale is less than 25%. So what would happen if the euro, if Greece would exit, that would seriously put doubt whether Germany and the rest of Europe is prepared to maintain the euro. So if they are not, if they give that signal like, okay, we are willing to drop members, could also mean that, well, there's a domino effect, because there are other members in the EU that also have high debts. Spain, Portugal, Italy, and after that probably France, Belgium, that could also fall. So this uncertainty of how the financial markets will result is probably even a bigger reason why not to allow Greece to exit. They are small, but Europe is also a currency. The euro is also a currency that is traded on the global market, and any signal that would undermine the trust that people have in the euro could have devastating consequences. Now, what we saw in the last weeks is that a lot of people who have a saying in the financial markets have been making statements about, oh, maybe a Greek exit is not so bad. And that's when I started to feel that probably the financial markets are giving a signal to Europe that they should not give in, that they would not speculate, start a massive speculation against Europe. So I think actually the second step, based on all the news and all the statements that were made by financial leaders all over the world, is an indication that they will not drop the euro. And what they were saying is actually that maybe you should drop Greece because you are also, we cannot believe you if you keep Greece inside Europe. That's a form of weakness, because that gives a signal that any country can cheat, and ultimately Europe could implode. So actually it would be a good signal for us to let Greece out. But it's very uncertain. It's very uncertain, because what people say and what people do is often not the same. So this uncertainty, would they take that gamble for another 100 billion euro or another 50 billion? Or actually what's currently at stake is only 1.5 billion. That's what needs to be repaid on July 1st. But after that 1.5, what's next? If they extend it for another 4 months, which is now the topic of discussion, which was the suggestion that was made by the Europeans and the IMF to extend another loan of 4 or 5 months, what will happen then? If in 4 or 5 months we'll have the same discussion, the same things will go on. So it's just dragging on and dragging on. Greece is saying we need time to rebuild our economy. Once we rebuild our economy, we can pay it back. Europe is saying no. We are only giving you the money if you pay it back. And you have to do this and that in order to make us believe that. It's a big gap. It's a very big gap. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I actually want to know, how about another country of Germany, for example, France?
Other countries. Well, other countries actually, and this is interpretation, right? So, for example, Spain has been doing quite good, and they have gone through austerity measures. Let's go back to this graph. So Spain is here. They saw their economy shrink, and they have significant unemployment problems, but they are doing much better than Greece. But what they're saying is, okay, so Spain and Portugal had to go through austerity. They did it. They suffered. Greece didn't. They didn't go. Why? And it helped. Why wouldn't it help for Greece? So why wouldn't Greece go through austerity? What they are actually ignoring is that Greece even went through more austerity than Spain and Portugal. But the fact that Spain and Portugal are almost at a zero growth level, whereas they were doing much worse before, if you look at the trend, they are both on the way to recovery. And Greece is on the way down. And what they're saying is, okay, do like Spain and Portugal, and you will, and it will be okay. But you have to bite the sour apple. You have to go through the sour apple. You have to bite the bullet. So you just do it, and it will be okay. Greece says no, it will not be okay.
The root cause of this current issue of Greece is to admit the joining the EU for Greece, right?
So actually what the EU was maybe too ambitious to put a country like Germany and Greece in the same monetary union. Completely different economies. Greece, when they entered, they were largely agricultural economies with some manufacturing, but not very significant. So they were producing olive oil and maybe some other agricultural foods with not too much export. They had a good tourism sector, whereas Germany was a global player. They had a very strong manufacturing sector, much stronger economy. The government, the government finances were much better in order than other countries. To put these countries in one union gives opportunities, because for Greece it would be much easier to access the German market. So there's a strong market with lots of rich people they can sell to. So that's the opportunity. But there is also a cost, because they have the same strong euro. And a strong euro means that Greek products, Greek agriculture products, become more expensive. So they gain market access in Europe, but they lose market access outside of Europe. What they would normally do, if they would still be independent and they still had the drachma, they would basically devaluate their currency, make the drachma cheaper until export start to pick up again. But they couldn't do that. So instead to help their farmers, to help their local economy, increase expenditure. And not only Greece did this, but also Spain, Italy.
Would you receive a question from the past members of
Yes.
every members?
First of all, do you have questions?
So what will happen if the Greece make the default on July 1st? So this I mean, but the European Union's members and IMF members will what kind of action will they make after default?
So basically, what is about to happen now? If they're going to default, they will be forced out of the euro, out of the eurozone. That means that they probably have to go back to the drachma. That also means that a lot of the loans that they have will probably be non-returnable. So it means that they have to write off everything. But the question is, at the moment, would it make sense for European countries and the IMF to throw more good money into the Greek hole? So for Greece in itself, it would mean a kind of a disastrous situation. Now with the drachma, they can devaluate their currency, so that they can become more attractive for countries outside of Europe, and probably a lot of some countries will step in, like China and Russia already put their eyes on Greece as an interesting area for investment. So we can probably expect some investment there, but Greece is in such a weak state that it's probably that they will not get a very good deal when this happens. Now they are still being kept up, but if they default, very likely they have to get out of the euro. And it's really 2 minutes to midnight, July 1st. It's July 1st, and so Friday, after months and months of negotiation, Spiros, the Prime Minister, said, "Okay, we're going to hold a referendum on July 5th."
Yes.
So people, like European government leaders, they were so pissed off. They were so angry. I have a video here that I would like to show you.
Hi, are you looking for a watertight web development course that will take you from beginner to creating professional?
The Greek government has decided
Jeroen Dijsselbloem.
to respond negatively to the proposals which the joint institutions have put on the table. They rejected those proposals, and the joint opinion of the other 18 members of the Eurogroup is that they very much regret this, that they regret the fact that last night these talks were broken off and that today no further negotiations or talks were possible. And not only have the Greek government rejected the last proposals by the institutions, you have to realize that those proposals already made maximum use of the flexibility that the Eurogroup allowed.
Today's Eurogroup meeting discussed the latest developments on Greece. We explained to my colleagues why we could not accept the institution's proposal 2 days ago. Briefly, it had to do with 3 fundamental issues. The first one was that the prior actions recommended were seriously recessionary and redistributive, yet again redistributing burdens from those who could and should bear them to those who neither could nor should. The second reason concerned the financing. The proposal for financing the 5-month extension period of the current agreement, the funding proposal that was on the table by the institutions, was technically inadequate. The numbers simply didn't add up. And when we asked questions about, in particular, the utilization of parts of the HFSF 10.9 billion, which was there in order to recapitalize banks and strengthen them in view of the problem with the NPLs, we received an answer that involved the ASM, and that, as we know, effectively baked into this short-term arrangement a new program. Both technically and legally, that did not make much sense, and I'm sure that other member states would have a problem with it, Germany in particular. Thirdly, and most importantly, what was proposed to us did not contain any plan for instilling hope in investors, both Greek and non-Greek, in consumers, in depositors, that this 5-month period that was proposed to us, would be a period of consolidation and a period of overcoming the crisis. Instead, it was punctuated by one review after the other every few weeks, leading to an end sometime in November, December, without anything in sight that instilled confidence in anyone that we wouldn't be in exactly the same negotiation, again with the threat of impasse, deterring through backward induction today investors from doing what Greece needs, which is to invest.
Okay, So first, Jeroen Dijsselbloem, the head of the Eurogroup. I met him 2 months ago, and I can tell that he was very emotional when he made this presentation. His voice is normally much lower, and so he was, well, of course, tired, but also very emotional. I can tell. So Jeroen Dijsselbloem, he said, okay, basically Greece simply rejected our proposal, and we gave them maximum lenience, but it can only go so far, and this is where we draw the line. So that's what they said. Varoufakis, who's the Greek Minister of Finance, as you undoubtedly know, said, okay, there are 3 reasons why we rejected this proposal. Number 1 is that actually, as a result of these proposals, that we were forced to put the burden of austerity on the people, not on the people who caused the problems, but on the people who cannot and should not carry the burden. Pensioners, people who are out of work, people like that. They would, so it was implied that they would pay the burden, for example, in reduced pension payments and other payments. So he said, okay, the measures that were suggested by EU and EMF would put the burden on the weak shoulders, not on the strong shoulders. That's number 1. Number 2, he was referring to a technicality in the an illegal technicality in the loan proposal that was not good. And number 3, he said, okay, this proposal doesn't do anything to help Greece to start growing again. We saw the slides before. This is basically a recipe for disaster. That recipe that will make us come back to the table, because it doesn't instill any hope. It will not bring investors to Greece. It will not reinvigorate the economy. So it will just shrink us further. And with that, how can we ever repay this debt? So it's not going to help us to do that. So this is definitely a deadlock. This is definitely a deadlock. And what do you think? What will happen? Will there be a Houdini escape before Tuesday? Or will Greece finally step out or be forced out of the Eurozone? What do you think? Aoki-san, what do you think?
If the
referendum, yes.
In 4th,
5th, yes.
5th January, and will I think it will be agreed to remain in the Euro.
Yes.
But the results make these governments will retire, designed will happen.
Yes.
What next? This if they agree remain in the Euro, but this country, these countries, people, Greek people, remains their attitude. Don't work, but get pension and other social social securities. What's next? So I doubt it. There's no hope to Greece.
So basically, there is short-term hope because Europe will allow Greece to wait for the referendum on July 5th. That's what you're saying, and then the government will fall, and then it's back to business, back to where they were. So maybe the socialists or the Democrats will come back to power, And that will be the beginning of yet another period where they make all kinds of promises, and they will not be able to keep those promises, and eventually Greece will need another bailout. Okay, quite likely. I think it's a very likely scenario. Who has a different opinion?
I have one question. Why Greece need necessary to national vote? Because I understand that time is Greek is broken. Why needs a national opinion? I think I need the opinion of a leader. What to do?
So this is a good question, and I think also that's very important that you put yourself in the shoes of Spiras and Varoufakis. They were chosen to become the leaders of a country, and the voters made a very strong swing from always voting in the middle and just keep on going and going and going to the very left side. So basically the voters gave an assignment to the new leaders to help them to get out. So what they told to the politicians is, okay, we need to do something, we want to get out. So basically they are leaders of a country that is in despair, economic despair. They have high unemployment, there is poverty, pensions cannot be paid, the banks are about to fall over, there's a run on savings. This country is really in despair. But if they would agree with Europe to take the loan, they would do exactly the opposite of what they promised to do to the voters. So they can no longer, they cannot say now, okay, we do whatever you ask us, because that goes directly against what people voted for in January. It is a lot of people think when they look at this situation, so how can Greece be so bold? But I think that the Greek politicians are much more concerned of what's happening in their country than what's happening around them in these ECB meetings and with the IMF. They are much more concerned about poverty, riots and unemployment than they are with refinancing that loan. Of course, that's also part of the deal. But their interest, their primary interest, is to get the economy back, and they are convinced that they need to take the measures, like need to tax the rich, need to make sure that they can collect taxes. They need to make sure that they do not just squander all their assets, but keep a stake so that there is a long-term perspective that eventually they can pay something back and not go to yet another bailout package. So I hope that answers your question. Oh, Takahashi-san もいる. Good morning.
Good morning.
Vietnam?
Yes.
Oh, お疲れ様です.
Sorry, I joined a little late.
No problem. Please ask your questions to Edo.
Yes. As you put the one comment on the Facebook that he has the island testicle.
That was not to be shared today.
What do you mean by? Is it really by the what? The island testicle, and is it a common notion for Greece in Europe? How can he be considered to have iron testicles?
Okay, iron testicles. So what? So what did I mean with iron testicles? And actually, I put that under an article that described that Spiros on Friday during the ECB meeting, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, announced that they were going to have a referendum. So you have to, if you put it in perspective, it's like you are on the playground. You're in high school. You're on the playground. You're completely surrounded by 25 people who are about to beat you up, and you're going to say, okay, give it to me. That is what means with iron testicles. So that means that you are not afraid to get hurt. So you have a lot of guts. That's what I'm saying. So how can you be so bold at that time when you're surrounded by an obvious majority? How can you have so much guts to announce a referendum that is to take place after the deadline? So the deadline is Wednesday. The referendum is on Sunday. So how can you be so bold to announce that? That is, I thought that this guy really has so much guts. So that's why I use the term iron testicles. Cojones, as they say in Spanish.
So how are the readers in Europe feeling on that comment from?
Outrage. I showed I don't know what time you came in, but I showed a video of Jeroen Dijsselbloem, who's the head of the ECB. And he was very angry, obviously very angry. His voice was shivering and much higher than normal. And I think it not only him but everybody. I mean, there were already a lot of people angry. It was in the media. It was leaked that the Greek politicians were yelled at during this meeting, amateurs, and don't stop wasting our time and things like that. So everybody is completely fed up with the attitude of the Greeks, and a lot of people now feel like okay. I don't care what happens, but on a personal level, I hope you drop that. So on a personal level, the negotiations have been spoiled. But this is also an interesting thing because Varoufakis and Spiras, they are not politicians. They are scientists. So they are used to heated debates, and that doesn't mean a heated debate means like looking for the truth, looking for the reality in science. But in politics, it means a little bit. It doesn't mean the same, because politicians are not necessarily looking for the truth. They are looking for through negotiation to reach whatever they are aiming for. So I think maybe the Greek players here are overplaying their hands a little bit.
So is there any notion in Europe that there might be the final card from Greece?
A final what?
Final, they might be trying to give them the big compromise at the final negotiation.
Well, honestly speaking, what was said last week, Wednesday or Thursday, it was said that if they don't reach an agreement by Friday, it's probably too late. It's going to collapse. But never say never. Never say never. Because everybody really wants to keep Greece inside the euro. Nobody wants to make such a big gamble. Nobody wants to test whether the international financial markets really are not going to gamble against the EU. So there's a lot of hopes that Greece eventually cave in. If they don't cave in, I don't think that it's possible for the European leaders to sell this at home, politically speaking. So Greece, one way or the other, has to cave in. If they don't do it, I think it's going to blow up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have a good time there. Okay. Somebody else would like to weigh in?
Hearing your session today, my understanding is that default of Greece and going out the EU of the Greece is different issues, or but it's no same problem, right? I think is there an option to stay
in the EU?
Member of the EU, when Greece will be default.
Yes. The only thing that they would be forced to, technically speaking, is that they give up on the euro, because there are rules that you need to obey in order to stay in the euro, and Greece, there's no way that Greece can obey to those rules. So basically that means that they have to get out of the euro, but that's not related to the EU membership. There are EU members, like new members in Eastern Europe, who do not have the euro, but who are members of the EU, and Greece would then become a regular EU member without the euro. So the EU and the euro is something else. So the euro is the currency, and the EU is the economic union.
When Greece will be deported, Greece must be going out to the EU, right?
No, must go out of the eurozone. So technically, they must go out of the euro.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah. So that's so they have to give up on the euro, not on Europe. But they didn't make lots of friends.
First of all, the Greece turmoil situation is based on their populism in the political system.
Yes.
This populism is a national character.
So, well, this is a little bit difficult for somebody from Northern Europe to say this, because I'm biased. But it is generally understood in Europe that Southern Europe is not very serious about their agreements. Not only Greece, but also Italy, also Spain, Portugal. They have a kind of different attitude. If you even look within Italy, for example, there's Northern Italy and there's Southern Italy, and that are basically different countries with completely different speed of economic development. The North is doing very well, but the South is not doing well at all, and basically the North is completely fed up with them, having to subsidize them, keeping their heads above the water. So there is now a Liga Nord, which is a very strong political party, even though they only have voters from the North. That is actually their main point of agenda, is to kick the South out. And within Europe there's also this understanding that Greeks and Italians and Spanish people, they have nice weather, but other than that, don't deal with them.
These countries not matured democracy.
Yeah, well, actually, so this is the thing. How can we say that Greece is not democratic? They invented the concept. So Greece is the cradle of democracy. That's where it was invented. But on the other hand, Greece had a long period of what's called dictatorship. They had occupation by they had the war period, but after that dictatorship. So they did not have a really full-grown economy, and there was a big incentive for politicians within the EU to increase their spending. I mean, you just hand out Eurobonds, and Eurobonds, banks will buy them because banks want them in order to get money from the European Central Bank. So it's basically so simple. The clients are dying for you to issue more bonds. So for politicians, instead of raising taxes, they can finance everything by issuing bonds, and they have clients for it. So the graph that I showed in the beginning of the presentation today is also a big incentive for politicians not to take unpopular measures, but to take the easy way out and finance your way out by issuing paper, by issuing bonds. And yes, Greece has been doing that. Also because they basically need it, because it was like they were in an area where they could not do what they actually had to do from a national economic standpoint. From a national economic standpoint, they had a currency that is way too expensive. Way too expensive. So what they normally would have done is to devalue the drachma and make their economy stronger or more interesting for outside customers, for customers outside of the EU. But they couldn't do that. So they had to stimulate their country somehow. And this is why Europe is also wrong in design. This is why they should have had a federation before a monetary union. So it was a very good idea, the European Union, politically speaking, because we didn't have any wars and there was integration. But there is also a big price that is paid, especially by the weaker countries in Europe, and also by the stronger countries, because our taxpayers in Northern Europe are carrying a lot of the burden of the Greek debt. So that's the price that everybody is paying. But the Greeks at this moment are in a much weaker position than we are. Much weaker.
Takai-san has another question.
Okay.
Takai-san, please.
Yes, taking one aspect of what is happening in Greece, what we are seeing is they fail to make themselves understood by the European Union, letting them lose a sense of what they are thinking.
Yes.
So if we would see some common points between Greece and Japan, what the difference between Greece and Japan, what do you think the difference of common point is, and is there any point that Japan should learn from what Greece is doing?
Okay, so the big difference between Greece and Japan is that the national debt of Japan is almost exclusively held by Japanese citizens. The Greek debt is in the large majority is held by foreign countries. So that is one thing. But there is one thing that they have in common. That what Abe has proposed as Abenomics is based on the same economic beliefs as what Greece is now proposing. Abe is also saying that okay, interest rates are very low. Investments are also low, so it's up to the government to increase spending and to end the period of austerity and start reinvigorating the economy. So not imposing austerity any longer, but increase spending. Even though we have a deficit, we need to increase spending in order to start the economy going again, and thereby in the future raising more taxes. And eventually, if the economy is back up to speed, we have to impose austerity, but not at this moment. So basically, Abe and Varoufakis, even though they are politically completely at the other side of the spectrum, they have the same economic beliefs as do many other countries. But for the people who give the money, the Europeans and the IMF. That is too much of a stretch to buy into, to wait till economic recovery and things like that. They need to see they want to get the money back as soon as possible. What is more certain than to say, okay, well, basically you're going to pay back because you're going to spend less. If you're going to spend less, that immediately makes money available to repay the debts, the loan that we are granting you. So they are not willing to buy into this more uncertain future that stimulating the economy has. But at the moment, Abe has very strong support within Japan. So people trust him that that increasing the expenditure will eventually will be good for the economy. So in that case, I believe that the taxpayers in Japan are not so much worried, and they give him the mandate, whereas the Europeans do not give the same mandate to Greece. So they are in a similar situation, but the creditors are different.
How about Taga-san?
So how about the book as a politics? Is he failing to make himself understood by?
No, actually, I do understand that they. I think they understand where he's coming from, but they say, okay, we are talking about loans and repaying loans and macroeconomic discussions. So the effects of increasing government's expenditure is not part of the scope of our discussions. So basically they say whatever you're saying, but we are not going to have a macroeconomic discussion here. So you just have to show us how you're going to pay back the money, and that is through austerity, by raising more taxes and reducing your expenses. That's how you can immediately pay this back. Whatever you're doing on macroeconomic level, that's maybe relevant to you, but not to us. So Europe refuses to listen to the arguments of Greece.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think soro it's almost 9 o'clock. So one last question maybe? Nobody? Okay. I hope today was a rather technical topic. I hope you could keep up with it, and hope you thought it interesting. I think it's very interesting what's happening now. It's bad, but it's also very interesting. Next week we will know a lot more.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining today.
Thank you.